Welcome, everybody, to the new Lyre show. My name is David Gosselin. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Chained Muse and New Lyre magazine. And we're here for another episode. We're back, and we're going to be doing this a lot more regularly. So I hope you'll join us. So I'm here with Adam Cedia, poet, composer, attorney. Welcome, Adam.
Good to be back.
So we're doing an episode dedicated to taking a look at some of the new or seasoned talent, I should say, original talent in the latest issue of New Lyre. This is actually the third issue now, and we're gearing up for the fourth, which is going to be coming out in the next weeks. So there's definitely a lot of timeless stuff here, and we want to give people a taste of it. This is the kind of stuff we wanted, a journal that people could actually carry around with them during their day. And when they have a quiet moment or something, and they want to tap into that deeper thing within themselves, what better way to do that than, a moment of collected silence and meditation on poetry. I think that's crucial right now because we have a lot of culture war stuff going on. But the problem with the culture wars today, I would argue, is that there's a lack of culture. And so the way to remedy that is with new, great works by contemporary poets who are able to capture that balance of timelessness and time, right? To, as Schiller said, be a son of their age, but not its captive, right? So what does that look like? What does timeless poetry sound and look like today? It's going to have echoes of past great stuff, but if it's to be truly great, it also has to do something new, right? The new becomes old in a sense, and the old becomes new. We rediscover timelessness within our own age. So that's what we want to look at and just have fun doing it, because it's a lot of fun, and probably a lot of people don't get this as much in our modern education system. So we got to bring it back. Here we are, Adam.
Here we are.
So we're going to do a couple readings, and we're just going to jump into it. We're going to comment, and people can also comment and let us know what they think and get a copy if they so wish, especially not even for themselves. I mean, if they know anybody who likes literature, right, who has a hunger or predisposition for desiring beautiful and timeless things, this is a nice way to cultivate and awaken that, I think.
And before we launch into the readings, I just want to add another point building off of what you said. We are lucky and should be thankful to live in this age where we have these alternative forums, alternative media platforms to discuss these issues. We're not beholden to the gatekeepers of the culture as we were, even 20 years ago or more. So let everyone who is interested in poetry and in poetic concepts take full advantage of this, because there's an effort to rein in that freedom and bring the gatekeepers back.
Yeah, and I suspect it's not going to work out as the bad guys necessarily would like it to. But yeah, so here we are. As the first selection, we're going to start off with something fun. Adam, you said that what was the first poem that caught your eye?
Well, the first one, if you go from page 1, would be Michael Birch's Fascination with Light.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So here, we're just going to read it here, and then we're going to find out why Adam likes it and just comment a bit. See where it takes us. So this one's called Fascination with Light. Death glides in on calico wings, a breath of a moth, seeking a companionable light, where it hovers, unsure, sullen, shy or demure, in the margins of night, a soft blur. With a frantic, dry rattle of alien wings, it rises and thrums one breathless staccato, then flutters and drifts on in the dark, aimless flight. And yet it returns to the flame. It's the light, as long as it burns. We're going to reread that.
Okay.
I'm going to read that.
Go for it.
Death glides in on calico wings, a breath of a moth seeking a companionable light, where it hovers, unsure, sullen, shy or demure, in the margins of night, a soft blur. With a frantic, dry rattle of alien wings, it rises and thrums one long, breathless staccato, then flutters and drifts on in dark, aimless flight. And yet it returns to the flame. It's the light, as long as it burns.
Well, what drew my attention to this, are you good?
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything before I launch?
No, I was just coming.
Okay. What drew my attention to this was two things. First of all, the form. It seems, if you look at it on the page, like free verse, but then a very subtle rhyme and rhythm emerge, and it has a definite form which is masked. And I think that's one of the trickiest things to do, and at the same time, one of the most attractive things about classical poetry or timeless poetry today is to have a form but be deceptive about it,
Right.
making it seem of the day when it's really very well constructed, or make it seem random or spontaneous when it's actually quite deliberate and well constructed. But the other thing is the metaphor, how, and I guess the greater feature is the metaphor, how this turns a very simple everyday observation, the moth fluttering. Anyone coming home at night sees the moths fluttering by the lamp lights outside. And that very simple, mundane thing is turned into really an illustration of one of the most profound feelings, the desire we all have for the light, as long as it burns. We know what the light is, and there's that innate desire we have always to return to it, even if we, as the poem says, flutter away temporarily.
Yeah, and I mean, there's many things we could say conceptually, right? And that's the beautiful thing about a good poem, is that it's visceral and it's rich in its imagery, but there's also a lot of meaning that needs to be unearthed, in the sense that it's pregnant. All the images are pregnant, and it's a question of really getting in there. A fascination with light, right? The moth flying around, hovering around this light. Shelley famously has a line, "The desire of the moth for the star," right? And he's talking about this innate longing within people, within mortals, right, for something beyond, and that it's out of reach, and yet we're always sort of, there's a hunger for it. There's a Edgar Allan Poe who cites Shelley in his the Poetic Principle essay. He calls it an immortal instinct, right? That poetry is not just the, various titillating sights and sounds that are repeated in some strict formal meter or form, but there's something in the distance as well that the poet has to capture. And so what's interesting about this poem is, in a sense, he captures it, but the light burns, right? And for me, this poses the question, does man always have to fly too close to the sun? Right? Like, there's Icarus, he's got his wings, right? In the famous Greek myth, where Daedalus builds these wings for his son Icarus, they're escaping from the maze and all that. But Icarus flies too high and he gets burned. Now, Shelley's metaphor...
He doesn't get burned, the wings melt.
Sorry,
he falls into the sea.
Exactly, the wax melts. Now, Shelley's metaphor, similar but different, right, of the moth for the star, this the star being infinitely far, and yet it's the thing that we long for. The paradox is that that means there's something in us already there that is predisposed to desire this transcendent thing. Here, I would say it's more of a there's a romantic quality of going back to the thing that burns you. So I don't know that it's the same as, say, the desire of the moth for the star. This is the moth going at something that it thinks is what it desires, but it gets burned. And I think there's a paradox there. And I'm sure everybody can relate to that in some sense.
Well, and then getting burned. I mean, how often does the wrong approach to something, we would say providing light to something good, burn us if we approach it in the wrong way? I think you could read it that way as well, not simply in the romantic sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pregnant with meaning, right? And yeah, sure. And we have kids here for our audience, so don't mind the children. We like the children, so welcome, children. Actually, Adam's son, I mean, this is for the audience. He recently won an award. He's 6 years old, and he won an award for the best writing of his age group, which is there must be something in the water there in Indiana, because it's not just Adam and I believe Jared Carter, another poet based in Indiana. And yeah, but your son won an award or something?
Yes, yes.
Prize?
Yeah, he'll be published in a collection from students of all ages from across the country. And his teacher submitted the poem without telling us, which is fine. And it got selected. So
he's how old?
6.
That's grand. Amen. So I'm actually going to read the poem that's next to Fascination with Light, also by Michael Birch, which will bring us full circle in a sense. I feel these two are quite complementary. So it's called Completing the Pattern. Walk with me now among the transfixed dead who kept life's compact, and who thus endure harsh sentence here among pink-petaled beds and manicured green lawns. The sky's azure, pale blue, once like their eyes, will gleam blood red at last when sunset staggers to the door of each white mausoleum to inquire, what use, O things of erstwhile loveliness? Completing the pattern.
Well, here we have, I think, the same, for lack of a better term, deception in form. It looks very spontaneous, but if you unite the lines that are separated, it actually separates into two very nice quatrains, with a
people can
a fairly regular rhyme pattern. Yes.
Idea.
But it captures almost a sardonic outlook and irony at the beauty of the cemetery, the pink flowers, the manicured lawns, the marble mausoleums, and it's meant for people who are dead. And what's the use? And I don't think though that's a cry of nihilism. I think it's a questioning of human purpose, and I sense in its tone, a motivation for us the living, because we're all going to end up like that at some point.
Under a manicured lawn, hopefully. But
if we're
yeah, here, and I'll just read it once more and then we'll move on. I mean, I think it's a nice it the question the poem ends with I mean almost every poem it ends with the greater question of our own mortality. And I mean it's hard to avoid in any great poem. It's usually going to come up in one way or another. But again, let's just read this. Walk with me now among the transfixed dead who kept life's compact and who thus injure our sentence here among pink-petaled beds and manicured green lawns. The sky's azure, pale blue once like their eyes, will gleam blood red at last when sunset staggers to the door of each white mausoleum to inquire, what use, O things of erstwhile loveliness?
Johnny, what do you want?
Ice for I got no cold for me, so I need to go change.
Did you get it on the floor of the table?
No.
All right. All right, go change. Sorry.
No, it's fine. So, next poem. Which one stuck out to you again?
For me, my next one was Death Letter by Johnny Payne.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so we're going down that. I'm sensing a theme here. We're going down that road. It's a nice summer day here, which makes for a nice contrast, which I mean, all great art, right? You got to have contrast here. So, death poetry on a nice summer day here in Montreal or Indiana.
Yep.
So, this one is by one of our contributors, Johnny Payne, who's a professor at a university in Los Angeles, I believe. So this is his death letter, also in the 3rd issue of New Lyre. The barrel stave was riven where she drank. Knots nestled, she lay on the cooling board, a trestle made of evenly sawed planks. I built a home from hosts of best oak planks. She shuddered in a shack where the wind roared amid the rain-made ruts from which she drank. No keeping count of all the pints we drank, or of the ravens that above us soared, only the chasms that we crossed on planks. Our shaking rattled all the bedstead's planks. The nails worked loose and left the fibers scored, and after, from a rusted pipe, we drank. Since first kiss, it was poison most we drank, yet never lips turned blue, until she soured and ended dead upon a dreadful plank. The joists of my house groan, as ships that sank drowned lovers who remained embraced on board. Right next I lay, until her bare flesh stank, heads nestled on the rough grain of the planks.
Just a side note, I don't want if you reread it, but the word is pronounced pints.
Pint. Yeah, okay. I knew it as I said it. Pints. Death letter. It's a villanelle. Correct.
Not quite. It's very close to a villanelle. It doesn't repeat the lines. It alters them significantly. But and in fact, it's in some ways it's stricter than a villanelle because it doesn't simply rhyme the first line with the third line of the middle stanzas, but it repeats the words exactly. So
right.
This is definitely villanelle inspired, but it's kind of its own form.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's got the terza rime quality, right, from the commedia. Yeah, I mean, it's a letter from beyond. I mean, that's always nice, right? I mean, we should probably read
Well, it's a letter to beyond, I think,
Right.
because it's talking about the loss of the beloved here, and what we have is this turbulent relationship, signified by the shaking, the chasms being crossed, shuddering, uh, all wind roaring. It's very turbulent imagery, and I think captures the turbulence of the relationship. But at the end, there's still the speaker still expresses the desire for the lost love. I mean, it's you might even say the turbulence was part of the attraction, was part of the love, and that's one of the ironies
Mm.
of 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 human action, of human nature, is when we think we would want peace and fulfillment and calm, what ultimately draws the speaker here is the turbulence, the battle, the excitement, the
Mm.
sense of um, achievement, and that is lost uh, and mourned in spite of the turbulence.
Mm. And the irony is that the form is yet very strict, right? It's about a
Exactly.
episode, or journey, and yet the form is there to sort of capture that, the constancy of the turbulence. Yeah, I mean, anything, again, we're talking poetry, there's always an aspect of transcendence, of beyond, but it happens in different ways, right? Sometimes we, as in tragedy, right, the great virtues or maxims and lessons, the light becomes clear through the contrast with darkness, right? Then, and these contrasts are key, I think, in any great piece of art. So we definitely have that here, in the sense that the subject matter is very dark. So it's definitely challenging us, right? But yet it's a letter written from beyond. And
Yeah, you might say it's by light that we would know darkness. And if all this did was portray this dark, turbulent imagery, what would it really do? It's the arrival, it's the bringing of that into the light that gives the poem its meaning and its impact.
yeah, and I mean, we rarely ever imagine what would a letter written from somebody from beyond sound like, you know, whether it was from our own selves from beyond writing to us, or someone else. It's a compelling idea, and there are a lot of rich paradoxes and ironies that it sort of kindles within us. So here let's contrast that. Now we're gonna keep contrasting something different. There's a lot of range in this issue, so we're gonna read something called Lemon Soap by poet Roland Hughes, who lives in Wales and writes in his writing shack and in cafes, and has been writing for quite a while, but only recently started getting published. And there's more than one contributor like that here in this issue. So yeah, there's a lot of hidden talent out there, and it's important that people get a sense of that, given we are in this age of constant culture wars, which is a lot of just politics veiled in, different attempts to exert soft power of sorts, but a lot of it lacks the deeper substance that we associate with, say, the classics, right, of any age. And I mean, I think this question of classical poetry today, classical art, is important when it's properly understood. It's a classic, right? What does it mean to have a classical education? Simply put, I think the idea is we're studying works that are classics, transcend time and place. And by getting a classical education, we're getting people to study those works which have succeeded in transcending time within their own age. And only a great artist can do that, or a great mind, right? Who isn't just the product of his or her age and is able to reach for something beyond and to give it a timeless form, a lasting form within their own unique setting. So I think this does this in an interesting way. So this is called Lemon Soap.
FYI, 10 minutes left.
Okay. So we may break up our thing to
Okay.
Lemon soap. My grandmother loved lemon soap. It was her special Christmas indulgence. The tin bath pulled comfortably close to the coal fire, a torn square of towel for a flannel, and her precious soap, still wrapped in its original paper, placed carefully onto a bone china saucer. The ritual was serene, her long gray hair tied back from neck and face. She lathered her body as though bathing a newborn baby. At this time, she was special to herself, frequently lifting the soap to her nose as though smelling an exotic rose. Holding the firelight in her eyes, an old body dissolved into the water, and the child crept into her skin. Her world lost in a time of stillness and thought. This was her moment of light. A china doll taken from its box and nursed awake with love. This is a beautiful piece and I think a nice contrast with what we read before, in that the question of mortality is still coming up, but there's also a question of youth, and they're meeting in interesting ways. You know, in our culture today, there's an obsession with trying to stay young or recapture youth in a lost time. I don't think this is what his grandmother's doing, and yet she is, in a different sense. She's tapping into that. It says the child crept into her skin. And she is tapping to that inner child, right? That thing that is full of wonder and awe, which Christ, he famously said, "Truly I tell you, in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must become like children," right? There's a rediscovery of wonder and awe, which as children, it's natural, right? Where children are just in a permanent trance state of just wonder and awe. But then there's a real world that sort of sets in, that has its own fixed rules and whatnot that have to be learned. And so there's a grieving, right, of that lost wonder. But then I think the third step, right, there's the early enchantment, there's a disenchantment, but then there's the re-enchantment, where I think poetry, art, and spirituality really come in, where we discover that deeper joy and awe at the world, once again seeing it for what it is. But now we're conscious, we're online, so to speak, and there's something special about getting to that third stage, which here seems captured.
I'm reminded of Wordsworth's Ode on Intimations of Immortality, where we have the special sense of the world that only the young child experiences, and how that's lost through the process of growing up and acclimating to the world. And there's a rediscovery that happens. It can't restore you to that original state, but it can make you conscious of what was lost. And I think that's what we have here, less discursively and more concretely portrayed, actually.
Visceral. It's very visceral.
Yeah, and very familiar. I mean, which one of us hasn't, tasted our favorite candy as a child and remembered all the memories that came with it, and indulged ourselves in losing ourselves a little in that lost time.
Mm.
And this is in contrast to, the Hollywood celebrities getting plastic surgery to try to appear young. This isn't trying to appear, well, it's not on the surface. The surface here doesn't matter. This is a return inwardly to childhood, not to, feckless youth. This is a return to the age of the young ages of pure wonder and innocence, and first experiencing the world. Everything seems fresh. And this old lady, despite all the things I can imagine she's been through in her life, still
Mm.
has that.
So, Adam, we're moving on here, and we realize, readers, that the first three poems were rather, or could be perceived as, a bit morbid, and so now we're doing a bit of a transition here, where we get to some at least lighter stuff, without necessarily being lighter in content.
Light without being frivolous.
Yes. So we have a translation section, which is a quite decent translation section, all original translated works. So we're going to do one, which is, I'm sure, likely not known by most poetry initiates even. It's a translation from German by Klaus Groth, who was a friend of Johannes Brahms. And so this is a very fine poem, which was turned into a German lied it was set to music by Brahms. And so we're going to read this one, and people are going to get a sense of we're going to see a theme, a development, I guess, of themes across the selection of readings here. So this is called the Regenlied, so the rain song. Fall rain, fall upon this old world, and wake deep in me the dreams that I dreamt when I was a child, when rain would wet the golden sand, when the sultry summer breezes frolicked through the evening coolness, and the morning's dewy leaves thawed, when the crop shone a darker blue. What a joy to stand in the rain with our bare and naked feet, to reach down into the wet grass and touch the fresh foam with one's hand, or to feel the cool descending showers as they greet our warm cheeks, to bear our youth's bosom once more as sweet perfume fills the soft air. Like the rose's calyx trickling with rain, my soul respires, like the flowers drunk with fragrance drowning in the heavenly dew. I would love to hear it once more, the sound of the soft rain pattering as my soul is graciously bedewed with a holy, childlike awe.
This is a good follow to the last poem. It deals with the exact same ideas of the adult looking back upon something that he held precious as a child, and the feelings it awakens from the perspective of the adult looking back on childhood. And you might say underlying that is a sense of mortality too, but it's very subtle. What you see though is the joy of having experienced childhood, and the joy that can still be awakened within on reflecting childhood, as thoughts as triggered by some outside stimulus that becomes the subject of the poem.
Right, in this case, it's the rain.
Correct.
Right, so the memory has this image of rain, and a whole flurry of memories comes with that, of reconnecting with that. And again, I mean, I think wax a bit philosophical. I think all these poems, I think any great poem presents all sorts of paradoxes, right? And images pregnant with meaning, rich with meaning. So I would love to hear it once more, the sound of the soft rain pattering, as my soul is graciously bedewed with a holy childlike awe. You know, Shelley, we had this idea of the moth for the star, and there's this desire within mankind, an immortal instinct for something beyond. And so the desire to recapture childhood. I mean, C.S. Lewis talks about that in one of his well-known works as well. It's a sermon actually, The Weight of Glory, talking about how we could go. Actually, we have this in the editorial, so we could go back to any of those moments, though, right? And you bring up Wordsworth, Adam, and his later ode on Intimations of Immortality, which is a slightly more mature poem in respect to Wordsworth and the usual themes of childhood. So I think now we're in the middle period, in the sense of there's a desire to regain something lost. And at the same time, if we investigate what that really is, right, and not just take it at surface value as, oh, we just wish we were like blissful children again. I mean, there's certain things that Schiller points it out in his discussion on the naive and the sentimental. You know, he talks about the naive as a powerful sentiment in art, right? Because it invokes the purity, the childlike purity and innocence. At the same time, the thing about for children is that it's not by merit, right? It's not like the child can be anything else than a child. But to gain that sense of wonder and to rediscover the wonder that is, and the beauty and the mystery that is the universe, right? Because the mysteries are always there, but they become conscious objects of our attention. I think they can be, in a way that they can't as children. We can't when we're children. Lewis speaks to this in this desire to regain something lost. And what is that desire really? I think there's a paradox here. He writes, our commonest expedient is to call it beauty and behave as if that had settled the matter. Wordsworth's expedient was to identify it with certain moments in his own past. But all that is a cheat. If Wordsworth had gone back to those moments in the past, he would not have found the thing itself, but only the reminder of it. What he remembered would turn out to be itself a remembering. The books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust them. It was not in them, it only came through them, and what came through them was longing. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshippers. For they are not the thing itself, they are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. I think this gets to the Poe's concept of poetry and Shelley's concept of poetry, right? Of the desire of the moth for the star, this immortal instinct that one could argue today, that's really what's suppressed in people. That's really what the Brave New World system of culture, the soma industry that we have, right? To keep people sort of satisfied, to give them the feeling, right? They're after a feeling, technically. There's this, we associate this yearning, there's a certain visceral feeling with it. But what is the feeling really, right? Can we name it? You know, we all have feelings. People always often have feelings where they feel a certain thing, but to name it and to really put our finger on it and know where it's coming from or what the nature of it really is can often be a lot more challenging, right? Things that seem the same are not necessarily, you know, is it the real thing or is it an imitation? And I said the Brave New World is really about offering people imitations, right? A soma industry where people can be distracted and push down that deeper yearning in the form of a convenient pill that allows them to feel as though it takes the edge off, at least, right? So you feel at least, but so that's a cheat, right? And I think here C.S. Lewis is talking about something similar in that we all have this deeper longing within us, and he uses the word Sehnsucht, a German word,
Yep.
about
which means longing, essentially. And
yeah,
and I
so
think that longing is a particularly apt description of the gap that we sense between the real and the ideal. And what's in the Brave New World, what the Soma provides, and by analogy, what we'll call it mass culture, pop culture provides is not, it's not a substitute for the feeling of longing. Longing is not it's not a feeling that, it's a feeling that stimulates thought and action. What's provided instead is distraction, so that you don't notice the longing, so that you have either shiny objects or, pleasant sensations in front of you to sate you, to dull your senses, so that you don't notice the longing that's always there.
Yeah, and I mean the whole thing with pop culture, right? Entertainment culture versus genuine culture and art, I'd say.
I don't even like using the word culture to describe it.
Yeah, it's a broad word, but the entertainment culture, as opposed to the classical culture or a timeless culture, the entertainment is very much about distraction, right? It's hard day's work, we're tapping out, we need a break. And like, sure, we've all been there and that's normal. But what happens when that's all the culture is, right? Where people have their work trance, where they're just going through the motions, and then they're checking out, right? And that's normal. Like in any difficult situation, in the extreme forms, this is what trauma is. This is what shell shock is, right? This is stuff that a lot of research was done. People check out. Sometimes they're permanently checked out because things are or they're not fully what they were, right? So that the entertainment culture is there to satiate or to dull, right? That these deeper, that there is something deeper there, such that we see it because people are not well adjusted. Is it healthy to be well adjusted in a society that is dysfunctional? That's another paradox. So, why talk about poetry? Why are we talking about this? Seems not so practical, right? Doesn't seem like the most immediate thing. But as the what we could call it, not an aphorism, but the adage, politics is downstream from culture, right? In the sense that politics is very immediate. We can see it sort of changing in real time, but culture happens generationally, right? You got to zoom out. So I like the image of the earth, right? The surface of the earth, the wind and the water. From day to day, we don't see the rock formations and everything happening in real time. But if we zoom out and we change our scale, there's really nothing that hasn't been shaped by the wind and the water and these geological processes and life over time that completely shapes everything that we're actually looking at if we zoom out far enough. And culture's like that, right? We don't see it right away. It starts with questions of taste, what people like, right? What people desire, what they imagine, the images in their head. And then it's cultivated from there. It trickles down from culture into education, politics, and finally law, right? And science. So people want an easy way out with the culture wars and the political sort of tribalism where like we're just going to fix everything. But unless this deeper thing is is addressed, right, and the real thing is awakened within people, there is no shortcut through that, I would argue.
I agree with that, and no one is really speaking to these deeper cultural issues. And I think, you know, societies of the past, poetry was essential to their education, to their formation, and ultimately to their government. I mean, the Chinese civil service exam for 1,000 years required knowledge of the classic works of poetry. And there was a reason for that, because that formed thought, and thought formed action.
And it shaped language, which shaped
But back
thoughts.
to Confucius, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are not obvious questions, hence why we think it's important to take the time, and why there's a journal dedicated to these kinds of things. So, Adam, the poem that you liked, we're switching gears,
is Waves of You by Martin McCarthy.
and here, so we'll let you read that one. We'll switch up so people don't get tired.
And Mr. McCarthy is from Cork, Ireland. So we have
Ireland.
a good selection on both sides of the pond.
Yep, and we're gonna finish with an American poet as the last. We're coming full circle here. It's all coming together, folks. It's all coming together.
All right. Waves of You. I want to hold you long and close, where waves break in the twilight. I want to hold you long and close, and feel your skin gleaming with joy. I want to hold you long and close, in the tiered fragments of a vision. I want to hold you long and close, whenever you come back to me, on the froth of the tide.
Nice twist right at the...
Yes, and it's very... It has the repetition, the refrain, and then the second line of each two-line stanza, each couplet, is in italics. So you get this sense of refrain and answer, refrain and answer. There's almost a dialogue within the poem, and we have the scene, then we have the touch, and then we have a sort of a vision breaking up, and then we realize this is just a vision. The addressee is going to return on the froth of the tide, implying, I'll call her a she, is across the wide expanse of the ocean. She's distant. You know, we were talking about desire and longing. This is a poem about longing, yet it's joyful in its longing. It knows the object of its desire is there, and that it will return. The speaker just has to wait, but isn't resentful or angry or dejected about it.
And it's not necessarily the thing itself, though, right? It's coming back on the froth of the tide, which is a beautiful image, right? Because it's so, it's so fleeting. The froth of the tide, right? It's just the top little,
and the tide is by the pull of the moon. It's something you have no control over. When the time is right, it will come.
Yeah, and so the voice and the the disposition of the speaker, right? Their emotional state is not one of, it's not frantic, it's not freaking out or anything, but it's quite composed, despite the unpredictability and the mutability of the thing. But at the same time, while the sea is unpredictable, the tide comes in and it comes out, right? It's going to return. So that's an interesting... Certain things are always going to come back, and that's embracing that also leads to a certain kind of transcendence, right? Rather than chasing after it, letting things find us or make their way back to us or to come to us on their own rather than chasing after things. I mean, that's a whole life that we could go on for a long time.
Well, and you realize you're part of something greater, that, you know, you're part of this system where there's a moon that pulls the tides, and there's peace in that, knowing that you're part of it and you don't run it, and you accept it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is just a great example because this is just a few lines. This is what, 8, this is 9 lines, but these are meaning pregnant images, right? Images pregnant with meaning. And the art of unpacking a poem is definitely something important for young people, right? And for anybody to be able to appreciate the nuances in things, because reality is very few things are as they appear, right? If we go about life with a surface level reading of things, I mean, we don't even need to talk about what happens on a civilizational scale, but it's not nice, right? We're just relying on a surface reading of things. And this goes back to Plato. This goes back to Confucius, and hence why Confucius, more than any other book, as you cited yourself, Adam, in your essay, in one of your essays, Confucius emphasized the need to study the book of songs, right? The odes, the great odes. There's a reason for that. So we're going to conclude with a poem by an American poet, so called The Cosmos by Daniel Leach. So this is a bit of a longer one, and so it's going to take us on a bit of a journey, but it's going to also give, therefore, a sense of there's a lot of variety in this issue. So as much as people have heard different things, there's a whole selection of different forms and themes explored throughout. So it's called The Cosmos. And how are we doing for time, Adam?
I haven't gotten the 10-minute up. I'd say we probably have about 20 minutes left.
We're good. We'll take her home. So The Cosmos by Daniel Leach. In fields of dark, we lay that moonlight. Once more. In fields of dark, we lay that moonless night and watched a million unknown stars appear, and in our spirits' dreamy outward flight, forgot all but each other. Breathing near, the sound of our voices was like a stream on which we sailed up through the atmosphere, to that vast sea where countless beauties gleam, and we no longer see with earthly eyes, but with the mind and soul, as in a dream, where vision, like thought, in an instant flies to each new world the human mind can make. As if there were no time, there were no ties to bind the soul, as when we are awake. We sat upon the edge of that great ring that girds the sun, as if it were a lake, upon whose surface luminous ripples bring the shadow of a power far away, that moves, like unheard music, everything with whose substance bright beams interplay. And watched in wonder, planets dancing by, each living in a different night and day, and glowing with the hues of its own sky. Some frozen giants, where the violent storms of primal forces for the faint light vie, looming in our minds like gigantic forms of ancient gods whose power we once knew. And others, where the blazing sunlight warms them to a fiery brilliance that we view as stars themselves, that burn in their own light. But one, a dazzling gem, all veiled in blue, as if a beauty half hidden from sight, in lovely symmetry, floats in between those grosser forms that rule the endless night. And it was as if, by a power unseen, we flew down through its clouds like meteors, over the snow-clad mountains and the green of endless forests, stretching to the shores of moving oceans, filled with living things, the birthplace of all that swims, crawls, or soars, and even the life-giving air that clings around the earth is but the breath of one vast living being whose presence springs to every crevice, even where the sun shines rarely, cold and dim, and even there, as when the infant world had just begun, it struggles to appear, and everywhere awakens dull materiality, from tiny creatures floating in the air to unknown shapes that haunt the deepest sea of life, ever becoming what must be. Yet over time's immeasurable course is moving ever upward, evermore, as if its spirit seeks a common source. All beings, as if something in their core, an ever-new dream whispered, to create some higher thing that never was before. And all that ever was seems but to wait on a creature that in itself contains all of that beautiful and awesome fate. And we looked down upon the outspread plains of history and saw something emerge as if it grew forth from the pulsing veins of earth. The traces of that primal urge that planted at the dawn of time the seed of that spirit to which all creatures verge, and all creation paused, as if to heed the presence of something it knew divine. The principle to which all others lead, embodied in one being, and the sign of knowledge was within his wondering eyes. Like stars reflecting on dark waters shine, and mirror the mystery of the skies. A being that could look upon all being and see the spirit that within it flies, and though he is, like it, forever fleeting into the darkness of a creature's grave, his words like shadows of the world of seeing, a sacred memory for the future save. And we saw time, like a great river, flow from distant flickerings in a firelight cave, where first imagination's magic glow found life and shadows dancing on the wall, and songs which chanted round the circle grow from the familiar sphere, now grown small, to tales of their ancestors' awesome deeds, and what becomes of our own souls, and all the wandering thoughts on which the spirit feeds. All art that ever higher passion stirred was present in that moment, like the seeds of a great forest, and the living word became the music and the poetry that echoing through the halls of time we heard. And we were watching as they went to sea with nothing but that restless, fertile mind and knowledge of the sky's vast canopy, and left all their familiar world behind. And as into the unknown realms they sailed, not knowing what those distant dawns would find, the secrets of the stars then unveiled. The secrets of the stars were then unveiled in ever higher and more lovely forms, and that unspoken language never failed to guide them through the alien realms and storms, as if it were a living spirit, higher even than the life-giving sun that warms all things within its ken with sacred fire. The stars, through unimagined eons, wait the spark of the immortal to inspire immortal hearts. And through that unseen gate, within each soul, those sacred yearnings pass, which are the soul and substance of our fate. All this we saw as we lay on the grass that summer night, and as we softly spoke, it seemed that we could see and feel the mass of mankind pulsing with one mighty stroke out into endless dazzling worlds of light. Then suddenly, it was as if I woke, and all had been like a clairvoyant sight that I could with another spirit share, as I felt that ideas awesome might. I turned and looked, and there was no one there. Right at the end, it gets us.
Yeah.
That's a journey. That's not, I would have had to practice that a few times to get it perfect. But I think that also speaks to the nature and quality of what we're reading and looking at here. in that to capture all this and capture everything happening in a poem like this is a lot. It's definitely it's a serious task, but I hope people were able to. I hope we're able to capture the moment even a little bit.
Well, Cosmos is an apt title. It's a real tour de force. It takes you through the universe, through the world, through history, through ideas. It's almost like you see a zooming in of sorts, returning you to the scene of the speaker lying on the grass, and then you have the turn right at the end. There's no one there. But does there need to be anybody there? The speaker has his thoughts, and they're there to share with everyone, and they're really the thoughts potentially of everyone. It's the cosmos of which he is a part and which he is realizing. So in the end, I don't think the speaker needs a companion. It's about the speaker as much as it is any reader who approaches it.
I mean, and
By
that's
the way, we're at we have about 7 minutes left.
So that's perfect. I mean, and that's just one. You're capturing one irony, right, and twist everything coming back, right? Where is this? We lay that moonless night. Where is that other person or being? And to find out there was no one there. So what was that? I mean, clearly there's echoes of Keats here, Ode to Nightingale, but on a deeper, I think the question of imagination. They say like mankind is an imaginative species. The imagination is the fount of creativity, of new ideas, of discovery. And so it's no small aspect when we consider something like, what does it mean for man to be made in the image of his creator, right? To be in the image of God, right? To have a creative spark. It's in the imagination is the fount of that. Without that, man would just be doing the same thing literally over and over, and there would never be change. And I mean, for animals, that's fine because they're animals, right? But they're part of a higher process as well, right? They're part of the cosmos too. And every creature has its place in that. But the place of this imaginative species is a pretty it's quite a mystery, we could say, but there's a lot there. And so how to develop these faculties, I think a poem like this, it sort of makes it a conscious object of our attention that there is this faculty. And how do we develop it? Where does it take us, right? When we do allow our imagination to go somewhere that maybe we've never been, right? Or that we haven't been yet. What would happen without it? So, I mean, I think a species or a society that loses this art of cultivating a creative imagination that is capable of unearthing deeper truths, right? Deeper beauty, and to wrestle with the mysteries of the cosmos, of the universe, of creation. I mean, that's where the magic, I think, starts to really happen, right? If we're talking about regaining the lost magic of childhood.
I don't think that can really be lost, though. I think it can be tried to be suppressed, either by oneself or by others. But I think that is so intrinsic to human nature. It's not something that can ever be wiped out. And you can get into the motives for transhumanism and everything with that, but that's a whole different show there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's actually a fine note to conclude it on, in the sense that the best a Brave New World can do is try to drown it out, right? But you can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of that spark. And that's why the bad guys can never fully pull it off, because we're talking about something, an immortal instinct, and it's an instinct in people. And so I think what's most important is you don't need to force it, right? You don't need to force this on anybody. It's already there. All we need is often, as poetry is a friendly reminder. So with that said, I would thank you, Adam, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for listening. So this is the 3rd issue of New Lyre.
Maybe tell them where they can buy it.
By going to, yes, so the Chained Muse, you can just click on our New Lyre link at the top, or go to newlyre.com and you'll be able to find the issues and just purchase them from there very easily. And we have another one coming. So yeah, there's plenty where that came from. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll be back shortly.